What's up, guys? It's Justin, and I'm here today with my good friend Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
So Mike is the creator of StyleCoachNYC.com. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get started with all this? What's a little bit of your background?
Well, my background is I'm originally from Florence. So I grew up in a household where both my parents were always dressed very well, whether I knew it or not. And I did have some influences where I did go to school and see how different cultures dressed, and Americans versus Italians. And just as I gradually started, as I grew up and everything like that, I realized that there's actually a difference in how somebody reacts to you just by the way you're dressed. So I started that went higher on my priorities list, how I looked physically, aesthetically, as far as my clothing and just how well I kept myself in general. And from there, I just became interested in this stuff, and I guess it's brought me to where I am today.
So, what is fashion?
To me, fashion is really an expression of who you are. Because probably the most important thing I would say in any fashion, whether you're trying to look kind of like a sporty beach boy surfer, or you're going for a more professional look, is that it needs to be congruent. It needs to somehow reflect what's going on inside you. And from there you can always sharpen it up. You can always make it look nicer, cleaner. Make it look like you're a little bit higher status if you'd like. But it should always be a reflection of you. That's what I would say fashion is.
I always think that a good way to think about fashion for a lot of guys is kind of a balance between your individuality and your individual personality, and then the general standards and customs of your culture, of your society, right? So you don't want to be too off the wall, too unique or whatever, but at the same time you don't want to blend in and just kind of fall into the background, so to speak.
Right, and I think really that's where fashion is really interesting and a cool thing to really experiment with, because you want to strike that balance, right? I mean, on one hand, let's say you're an astronaut, you can't go around in your astronaut suit, right? But maybe, I don't know, you want to wear a little NASA symbol on your shirt or something like that, and that maybe is going to portray your personality in a way that's more acceptable to society, right? Because on one level, there's who you are and how you want to portray that, but on the other hand, as you mentioned, there's this kind of overall standard in society at an individual moment in time, which actually varies from country to country as well, based on what's acceptable and what situations are appropriate for what kind of dress too. So you always kind of have to look at all those elements and try and portray yourself through modern fashion in a way that's kind of, as you said, unique and special, and really displays some of what you are, but at the same time, maintaining kind of a good
balance, I think.
Yeah, a good aspect socially too,
What is this difficult to do for guys? Is this a hard thing to do?
Honestly, just like anything else, I think it just takes a little bit of focus. It's like when you go to the gym. If you go to the gym the first time, sure, it's gonna take you a little while to get used to and all that kind of stuff. But I think anyone who just starts focusing on this kind of stuff will naturally pick it up, because fashion's everywhere. You can't really leave your house without seeing people. Seeing how they're dressing, seeing maybe where they're going. And also, the more you focus on it, you actually start to realize, wow, I really like how that person's dressed. Or that person, I don't know about that. So you can start coming up with your own opinions. And even in movies, start checking out how people look and all that kind of stuff. And before you know it, your mind will be geared to thinking about fashion. And next time you go shopping, you're going to be I've seen that around. I really like that look, so I'm going to adopt it.
Yeah, you start noticing things. Stuff that was already, it was always there. It was kind of always in the background or in the environment, but maybe you didn't pay attention to it as much, or you weren't paying attention to the little details and what they said about the person. But women notice these things. I think all people notice them, and the way a person presents themselves, the way they walk, the way they hold themselves. It makes a difference in how we see that person, on some subconscious level. And that includes clothing and accessories and everything. But women especially seem to be more sensitive to these things than men.
Yeah, absolutely. And one really easy way that I can tell that is just that, let's say I'm really well dressed and going somewhere. Somebody will not necessarily compliment you on what you're wearing unless they have an eye for fashion. because if they're complimenting you, it means they actually realize like what kind of look you're trying to pull off or what you're trying to do with what you're wearing. So what I notice is that drastically more women will compliment me on what I'm wearing rather than guys. You know, they'll be the ones who notice it more. They're the ones who are going to give me the looks more so than men. So I think that just goes to show, in general, how women are much more careful with that stuff and pay a lot more attention. And I mean, definitely, if you're trying to attract women, it's something you need to pay attention to.
Speaking of attraction and sexual desire and everything, you know, you're a guy who deals with fashion and style. How much of an impact, if you were to hold everything else constant in a guy's, like his social skills, his conversation skills and everything, and you were to maximize his look, right? Mm-hmm. How much of an impact does that alone have as far as his sexual desirability to women, do you think?
I think the way a man looks is incredibly important, and I think it would definitely be like maybe even a 30 or 40% increase in kind of like the sexual desirability that he has. Why? Because fashion is something that, yeah, sure, it might be one general area of your life to focus on, but it shows up like pretty much everywhere. You know, I mean, you know, you're not going to go around naked, right? So you're always going to have like something that you're wearing, and there's many different ways that women notice it. Number one, if you're just in a social environment, maybe at a bar or club or even just out during the day, anytime a woman looks at you, she's going to notice your sense of fashion. A man's shoes that he wears or his watch could very easily show something about how much he makes or how wealthy and comfortable he is. It also shows something about like his personality, and just the fact that he's paying attention to that stuff is really kind of showing that he's maybe multidimensional or, you know, just more interesting in general. So that's just during the day. But then even in a relationship, you know, just even like the clothes you're wearing and the way you present yourself really kind of raises the value also of everyone that's around you. You know, because they're associating with somebody who is just like more dominant. You know, fashion can very easily go ahead and make you look like you have more power, you know, more freedom with who you are and with your goals in life. Also because, let's not forget that it's kind of hard to really just say that fashion is something that projects outward, right? Because I believe that the way you dress has so much of an impact on yourself as well. Right. You know, just like if you go out, and you know, we've all had this. We have days where we go out and we're feeling like $1 million, and we know we look great, and we have our hair right, and we're wearing our best, like maybe new clothing and great shoes and all that kind of stuff. And then other days where we just maybe throw ourselves together, and there is like a very palpable difference in how you feel when you're dressed to the nines versus when you just like throw in a pair of sweatpants.
Yeah, it's a great point because a lot of guys they don't realize that. You know, they think that, you know, it's just clothes or something. But, you know, the way you do your hair or like the way the things that you wear on your body, you look at yourself in the mirror and suddenly you see yourself in a different light, you know? I mean, so if you're a guy who's never worn a really good suit, for example, you know, a really nice fitted suit, good material, and looked at yourself in the mirror, you know, you're missing out, basically,
Absolutely.
Right? You're missing out on that image, that energy that it gives you, because, you know, when you put on a certain look or a certain outfit, you are plugging into a certain archetype, right? It's like a certain image that exists in our culture, whether it's a suit, whether it's a rocker guy, whether it's a rap guy, you know, whatever it may be. You mentioned something about dominance. What does that mean exactly in this context of fashion style?
I would say that in general, dominance is something that as a society we have kind of wired into our brain, right? And dominance comes really with status, okay? So whereas, you know, men will go for physical looks and aesthetics, and women, when they're like looking for attraction in a guy, a lot of the things I think they'll look for is, you know, status, power, dominance, a guy who has it together, you know, who's living a great life. And the way that fashion plays into it is that, you know, over time, on TV, literally everywhere in our lives, we see that a certain level, or I would say a male with a certain level of success, a certain level of power, is going to dress in a certain way. it's inevitable. You know, you can, you know, look at anyone from like the president to Tony Robbins to really anyone who's successful, and you know, they might not dress the exact same way, right? Like for example, somebody who's like a really famous rapper or basketball player, when you know he gets all dressed up, he might not look exactly like, let's say, like the president or maybe like some other celebrity, right?
Right.
But the thing that stands out in all of those cases is that they dress in a way that is high quality, you know, that they pay attention to the details,
and it's high quality within their niche.
Right. Let's say
so it's
that.
like and that goes back to the individuality versus, you know, the balancing thing, because it's like you're not dressing in a way that is unnatural
Absolutely.
for you. Rather, you're maximizing your own personal style, your own personal niche, right?
Exactly.
And that's something that a lot of guys need to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and actually, that's why I focused on that, like on my blog. That's one of the first primary things that I thought was really important to hit on. Just really creating your own style, because you know, all of us individually, and up until a point even I was doing this, we just tend to copy what other people are wearing. But when you start looking at what's going on inside me and how can I take that and kind of portray it outwards, then that's where you really get a more unique sense of style that's tailored to you and that you can really do a lot more with.
Yeah, in my case, you know, when I started dressing better, what I did is I honestly, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to my own preferences, because I didn't really have any preferences. You know, I didn't really have much experience as far as style was concerned. But what I did is I looked at what was out there. You know, I looked at other guys, I looked at maybe celebrities, you know, other successful guys that were walking around in the street holding hands with the kind of girls that I was interested in.
Exactly.
Right? So, I mean, that's a great exercise for a lot of guys. Like when you see a hot girl, you know, okay, notice the hot girl, but also notice the guy that she's with.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and like how is he put together? How is he dressed? You know, what kind of accessories is he wearing? Bracelets, earrings, tattoos, whatever. That gives you an idea, okay, if this is the kind of girl you're interested in, that's the kind of guy that she's interested in, right?
Yeah.
So that can be very informative. But basically, you know, I looked outside and I looked at what was going on in the style world or whatever. And that's where I started to get some ideas, and I started to get some inspiration. And then over time, I refined my own style, you know? So it's like I injected more of my own personality into it. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think that that's a good approach or a good strategy for guys that just kind of, they don't have much experience, they don't really know anything, they just need to dress better, but, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an excellent way to go about it, actually, because, you know, I mean, when you start off, you might not necessarily have that unique idea of exactly what you want to portray. However, at the same time, you can very, very easily, you know, go out there, look at what celebrities are wearing, look at just in general, like if you've ever noticed that like you kind of like how somebody just looks in general, or maybe their aura or their persona, maybe like even some of your idols, you know, like look at what they're wearing. You know, like personally for me, really what made a big difference is like I kind of realized, all right, what's really within me that I want to portray outwards, right? And because, you know, once you do cover the fashion basics, then that's where you're at. You know, once you get better shoes and well-fitted, you know, shirts and pants, you know, some nice blazers and some good high-quality shirts, then after that you want to maybe tweak it and you want to start looking at like, you know, what kind of personality that's already within me do I really want to portray outwards, right? So for me, one of the things that I did was I knew I wanted to portray like a kind of like a badass rocker, like motorcyclist look. And then I knew I also wanted to portray kind of more of like a high class, you know, put together, like maybe like club owner look. So what I did was I went online, just on Google even, and I started typing these phrases into Google. And, you know, I looked at, you know, accessories for, you know, rockers. I'm big fans of like Guns N' Roses and those kinds of groups from way back. So I started looking at like, well, what were they wearing? You know, and then how can I tweak that to make it like more modern? You know, so, you know, got leather jackets, some nice biker boots, and, you know, I'm moving in that direction. But at the same time, I want to point to the fact, like, you know, motorcycling is something I want to get into. I play guitar, you know, so it's like it's all things that are congruent with my personality, right? But really just doing that helped me figure out how to portray that out into the world.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I would say for guys at first, just start with the basics. Look at basic accessories such as, watch, shoes, pants and shirts that are well fitted. Go for higher quality, as much as you can, right? As much as your wallet can afford. And then from there, you can then start tweaking it and making it your own.
Yeah. What is the most important item, speaking of which, pants, shoes, if a guy has to get started, what is the most important item on the body, do you think?
Well, I think,
if any,
if we're looking at all of it in general, I would say for a man, definitely like the shoes that he's wearing. Because a man can be dressed exactly the same way. In fact, even when I've seen guys like really attractive girls, that's really what stood out. Like a guy might just be wearing a t-shirt and shorts, but his sneakers are like clean and like really like nice, expensive looking sneakers. So whatever you're gonna do, you want to make sure your shoes are taken care of. Now, even though I would say that that's the most important part of it, I would say that's not necessarily where you need to start, right? Because if you're not at all well put together, with your, like, let's say your shirt is like ripped and your pants are like really baggy, even if you get really nice shoes, it's not going to make much of a difference. So I would say, to start with like getting some better fitting clothing in general. But the most important thing that you want to focus on down the line is going to be your shoes, and you don't necessarily have to pay a lot for shoes, just look at some nice brands that you like and wait for maybe shoes to go on sale, and you can easily get like $150 shoes for maybe even like $60 or $70.
Right, and then those, if you take care of them, those can last you a pretty long time.
Yeah, taking care of them is actually very important. Just cleaning them down every once in a while, or polishing them is a great way to keep your shoes in top shape.
Yeah, I in my case, not just with shoes, but in all my clothes in general, I don't really have that many articles of clothing. Actually, I probably have, probably 5 shirts, not including like undershirts or whatever, but like in terms of collared shirts or like sweaters, maybe 5 of them that are pretty good quality, and then I have like 2 blazers, and then like 3 or 4 pairs of pants basically, and that's pretty much it. And it's just a question of recombining them in different ways depending on the look that I'm trying to present, and depending on the weather, is it cold out, warm out, whatever. So you don't have to get a lot of clothing. What you need is the right clothing. You need high quality clothing.
Exactly. If you have that, then it makes things a lot easier. Because otherwise, if you get low quality clothing, number one, it's definitely going to show its wear a lot sooner. So maybe you wear it once or twice and it looks like pretty good. Then by the 3rd time, the seams might be coming loose and all that kind of stuff, and you don't want that.
The good thing about men's fashion, one good thing anyway, is that it's not as sensitive to trends and to this kind of cyclical, this fickle thing that women's fashion often has, right?
Right.
So like the way I dress today is more or less how I was dressing like 2 years ago.
Right.
But if I was a woman, then that wouldn't necessarily be a good idea, right? Because there's so much emphasis on trends and like what's the new thing, the new color for the season, all that kind of
thing.
Which
is actually why I think men's fashion is so great, because you can really just go ahead and once you build that repertoire, regardless of how many items it is, you can always go back to that. Keep building on it, but always use it. Just because I bought a shirt 2 years ago doesn't mean I can't wear it tomorrow to a party I might be going to, right?
Yeah, and it's all about paying attention to those fundamentals, those fundamental pieces that are just kind of that are high quality, but also very long lasting.
Absolutely.
And can be applied to many different situations.